And then you kept coming at us. And now you got black people saying, hold on a minute. Matter of fact, we happy to see y'all go. Matter of fact, not only are we happy to see you go, we are benefiting from you leaving because you kept pushing us. And that's just not cool. Shout out to my man, Barry Little, for getting me to 45. Now let's do 47 in celebration of Trump. Give me 47. Now, we look, we know what it's like to struggle. We've been at the bottom of the system. We weren't even in the system. The system was sat on top of us for centuries. We literally held this country up. We built this country because we were the foundation of this country. We paid into it with blood, with sweat, with tears. They literally used black women as baby making machines. They had breeding farms in some of these places in North Carolina and Baltimore and New York. They had breeding farms, and black women were literally breeding the children to be sold into the economy to do labor. So look, our ancestors fought and died. They sacrificed more than any you could ever imagine, just so we could have a shot at something better. Meanwhile, you got newcomers who come in and exploit our resources and then demand protection when it suits them. Let's be honest with each other. They didn't build a black church. Okay? They didn't fight against Jim Crow. They didn't march on Washington in 1963. We did that. We did that. Now the deportation happens and they suddenly expect us to rally behind them. Think about that, fam. Think about that. Where was the solidarity when black Americans were being pushed out of jobs and out of neighborhoods and out of our business? Where was the solidarity when immigrant-owned stores set up shop in our black communities and refused to hire us? Where was the solidarity when these Hispanic gangs in Los Angeles were shooting and killing unarmed, innocent black folks who were just trying to live in their neighborhoods where they had been for generations? Where was the solidarity when we were left to fend for ourselves in a system designed to keep us at the bottom? Let me tell you something about illegal immigration. Even Mexican-American leaders understood that illegal immigration was a problem. Let's talk about the real history of illegal immigration or immigration and labor in this country. Julio Cesar Chavez, one of the greatest Mexican-American leaders and labor organizers. He stood firmly against illegal immigration. That's right. Chavez knew that undocumented illegal workers were used to drive down wages and hurt American workers and undermine our labor rights. In 1974, 50 years ago, Chavez led a protest against illegal immigration, arguing that businesses were exploiting undocumented workers to weaken unions and cut wages for legal workers. And he called them strike breakers. And he fought against their use in agriculture. See, this is why they don't bring him up. That's one of their greatest leaders. They rather bring Dr. Martin Luther King, because when you start digging into what their own leader said, he was a labor leader. He contradicts the foolishness that they're doing right now. And the reason is he saw firsthand how business owners collaborated with illegal immigrants to undercut the wages of hardworking Americans. This includes Black, Latino, and white American laborers. Chavez, in his wisdom, knew that the unchecked immigration wasn't just an issue of legality. It was an issue of economic survival, the same thing I'm talking to you right now about. We see the same pattern today. Business owners love illegal immigration because it gives them a cheap, exploitable labor force. And guess who suffers? Well, they pocket the money They still charge you the same price. They're not going to give you, they're not going to reduce the price because they're getting the labor to you. They still pocket it. So who suffers? Number one, the American worker. And as far as this particular conversation, black men in particular are pushed to the back of the hiring line because we're unable to compete with the under the table labor prices that's driving the wages into the ground. So even when one of the greatest Mexican or Latino civil rights leaders, he could recognize that illegal immigration was a problem, and you can't. Why are we expected to support something that actively harms our communities? Look, we have 45 super chats. Get me to 50, because I know ain't nary one of y'all know who Julio Cesar Chavez was. And everybody on the internet should be using that in their response when people talk about these illegal immigrants up here being sent home and working here without their papers. But here's the thing. Let's expose one of the greatest lies in this entire debate. The best argument that illegal immigrants can put forward is that they're doing the jobs that Americans won't do. I want you to think about just how un-American that is. I want you to think about that. Think about what they're really saying about Americans. They're saying Americans are lazy or too lazy to work hard. That's what they're saying. And that's an insult hidden in their so-called defense. But here's the truth. Americans aren't lazy. Americans are innovators. Americans find ways to fill gaps. The moment these illegal immigrants leave, the work is still going to get done.
While blacks cannot emulate ethnic immigrants, where is blackness in the rainbow? During the last 3 decades, it has become politically correct to dump blacks and their racial problems into broad categories such as ethnic issues, special interest, and minority groups. It is also popular now to view the grievances of all groups as equal in all respects, placing blacks into an aggregation of dissimilar groups and equating their circumstances with other minorities as little more than political sleight of hand, an illusion of equality in a so-called colorblind American society. America is far from being colorblind, and equality exists only in the minds of those who pretend that inequality is equality. It is disingenuous to equate Black Americans' conditions with any other ethnic, religious, or so-called disadvantaged minority. Blacks have a unique history in this country, and that their status was predetermined by the dominant society's national public policy on the use of Black Americans. Grouping blacks with lesser aggrieved groups, in effect, mutes and obscures the legitimate grievances of blacks, while veiling the moral, legal, and financial responsibility the dominant society has to correct the suffering of 36 million Black Americans. And now we know we're over 40 million now. Declarations that the country is now colorblind are misstatements that resolve nothing. The colorblind myth simply maintains the status quo, thereby keeping blacks non-competitive and marginal. And 4 centuries of slavery and Jim Crowism have taught blacks anything about race relations, it is that as long as people can see, color will be a factor. Both by nature and nurture, humans are motivated to be self-centered and place their self-interest above all others. Self-interest leads to competition among individuals and groups for material and social gains. Carl N. Degler reasoned that in a fluid and competitive social structure, all devices are used or called upon to assist in the gaining and maintenance of status, power, and economic advancement. I'm going to read that again. In a fluid and competitive social structure, all devices are used or called upon to assist in the gaining and maintaining of status, power, and economic advancement. Dominant white society has a long history of masking the reasons that it would not uproot the debilitating conditions that it has imposed on Black people. Dan Lacey, a historian, criticized the hypocrisy of the dominant society's attitude towards blacks, saying, whites dominate blacks. Whites denounce blacks as lazy and lacking ambition while they resent black competition. They are angered by taxation for welfare and other social programs, but are equally angered by equal opportunity in affirmative action jobs, politics for blacks. They mock the lower academic achievement of black children, then assign the best teachers, materials, and financial resources to white schools in the suburbs. So he's calling out the hypocrisy of white America, but white America's hypocrisy is purposeful. Whenever blacks attempt to change their circumstances by demanding assistance from the various levels of government, whites predictably ask the question, why can't blacks be self-sufficient like the Jews, Italians, and other ethnic groups and help themselves rather than going to the government for assistance? Some blacks, those who lack competitive skills and income opportunities, ask government and white society for public assistance because they prefer public aid to stealing what they need. Most blacks are demanding compensation for reparations from the government for the centuries of expropriated labor and the legacies of slavery and Jim Crowism that continue to place European whites, Hispanics, and Asians over them. Blacks are too socially and economically handicapped to effectively compete in an integrated society with advantaged racial and ethnic groups and other protected minorities such as women and the disabled. To classify and equate blacks with these groups is not only dishonest, do-nothing approach, it also portends serious future social disturbances. America has maintained a racial and ethnic ranking of preferences that places European whites, Asians, Hispanics, and Indians over American blacks. These preferred groups have a double advantage over blacks. They have a higher social acceptability, and they were never mistreated and dominated by white society or government the way 16 generations of blacks have been treated. This double advantage makes it clear why it is inappropriate and misleading to lump blacks into a minority category along with the preferred and protected groups. In addition, it is not possible for blacks to emulate immigrant groups because these groups have always had options to help them rise from one social class to another after they arrived in America. Immigrants were never burdened with the experiences or the legacy of slavery and Jim Crowism. They came to America with hope and belief that the situation here would be better than their country of origin. Centuries of immigrants have entered this nation believing that this was the land of unlimited opportunity, where a person was free to advance and go as high as his skills and God-given talents would take him. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, continuing my reading of Dr. Claude Anderson's amazing book, Black Labor, White Wealth, The Search for Power and Economic Justice. This is chapter 5, why blacks cannot emulate ethnic groups. And you can see in the clip that I showed earlier, Uncle Dennis Sperling, the Blizzard King, talking about the immigration issues that Black Americans face. So Dr. Claude Anderson has always talked about other groups coming into America to replace blacks and replace blacks as labor and within the labor force, and to replace blacks socially and any other way that they can replace blacks in the American society. And black people, Black Americans, our biggest downfall is our lack of competitiveness, our lack of unity, our lack of cohesiveness, and our lack of competitiveness. Now, that is by design. That is by design, but it is high time for us to change the programming. But what has been done has already been done, and things are already set in place. So now immigrants are also competing with Black people, because Black people are no longer just competing with whites. They're no longer just being locked out by the whites. They're being locked out by the whites and having to compete with all other groups of whites, as well as the Asians and the Hispanics and other groups, Arabs and other groups who come to America. And when these other groups come to America, they are taught, trained, even Black immigrants are taught and trained that we are the problem, to stay away from us. We are the downtrodden. We are the the rogue. We are the trash of the American people. That's how they view us. That's how they talk about us. And we're lazy. We're shiftless. We have no ambition. We're criminals. We're sex crazed. We're drugged up. All the negative things that they can think of, they think of them and they say about us, and they tell these other people, and the word spread. And as soon as they see a Black person emulating that behavior, now it is solidified. This is how Black people act, as if they don't understand that even among their people, they have undesirables. Every group of people have undesirable degenerates. Every group of people does, but it's exasperated when it comes to Black Americans. But the larger issue is the competitive issue, because we are now competing with many groups of other people on one end, and we're being lumped in with these other groups of people on the other end as far as our social problems, our social issues. Other groups co-opt our problems, our movements, the things we speak out about. It always get co-opted or lumped into. So that's why Dr. Claude Anderson has always fought back against the title of minority or all these other inclusive titles. So the delineation that is going on within the FBA community, I'm not against it, because delineation does need to be made, because Black Americans have been spit on, stepped on, squatted on by all these other groups who claim to be our allies. They're allies when it comes to so-called aligning with our issues and taking over our issues, but they're not allies when it comes to actual real help and tangible outcomes. So let's get into this immigration issue and why it is an issue, and why America isn't the melting pot that they say it is, and why this is not a post-racial society. And Black people, we are definitely on our own. So picking up on page 89, where it says Black immigrants or not. Historians often refer to American Indians as the nation's only indigenous or non-immigrant population group. This notion is false. If American Indians are America's only non-immigrants, then that will make Black immigrants, which they are not. The ancestors of American Indians migrated to North America across the Bering Strait from Asia. Black Americans did not immigrate to America. They were transported to America against their will. Inherent in the term immigrant is the element of choice and the selection of a new home in a new nation. He got a point. Many ethnic immigrants come to America fully equipped with the economic know-how and business acumen that they develop in their home countries. As required by U.S. immigration policies, they are well educated and have professional trades. They have business experience and access to products and industries in their mother country and their mother country around which they can build businesses in this country. They have boundless hope and competitive motivation to succeed in this land of opportunity. Their business contacts and products may be related to importing ethnic foods, arts, and craft products, or exporting American products to their home countries. Most Black businessmen have limited business experience and few cultural products to market. For the most part, they do not have family, friends, or other natural business contacts in Africa. European, Asian, and Hispanic immigrants come here with contacts in their countries of origin, which they have often used for commercializing their culture and business opportunities in America. Few legal immigrants in modern times have come to America impoverished. Many are people of material and social substance at home, particularly those that came as political refugees, forced to leave behind businesses and careers that were sudden crisis hit. Even if they are forced to start over, they are equipped to do so. Many enjoy assistance from the U.S. government through legislated refugee programs for groups such as Cubans, Vietnamese, Cambodians, Hungarians, and Koreans. Others receive assistance and aid from the Central Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Department when they arrive. Immigration process encourages ethnics to develop and control their communities. While Blacks are seeking to build their businesses around the integration process, ethnic immigrants are more nationalistic in their process. They do not buy into the melting pot myth. Understanding the principles of the way this country's the way this country's economy works. They seek to create specialized niche economies around their culture within the larger framework of the national economy. Immigrants are not opposed to venturing into other racial or ethnic communities to take advantage of wealth building opportunities, but they keep their own community relatively closed to outsiders. That we haven't learned because we're so open. We invite everybody to the cookout. We're not organized. We don't have a base or access to resources or something that we're connected to outside of America. We came to this country, yes, skilled for slave labor, but not for the booming of the producing America as free people, right? So our coming to America is vastly different from any other group who is in America. Vastly different from any other group who is in America, because we were forced here and we were forced to as labor. We didn't come as free people with the choice to build and make our lives better. So let's talk about culture-based ethnic businesses, right? Many of the early immigrant groups established cultural niches or turf control over certain public sector jobs, businesses, and vocations. When these groups cornered niches, they then had avenues for providing employment, businesses, and political opportunities to incoming members of their group. Control of these social and economic areas promoted interracial group dependency. Interracial group dependency, right? They provided, intra, I said inter, but I mean intra group dependency. The intraracial group dependency, not inter, but intraracial group dependency. They provided opportunities to attract capital, market their culture, maintain a community economy, and exact ethnic economic accountability. Black communities do not own or control socioeconomic centers within their communities. Douglas Glasgow, a scientist, pointed out many of the traditional examples of ethnic economic centers in his book, The Black Underclass. He wrote, the Italians sought and ruled the shipyards, docks, unions, ethnic restaurants, and fire departments. Jews took over the garment and jewelry industries, banking and lending industries, major professions, and entertainment. The Irish dominated the alcoholic manufacturing, distilling, and distribution industries, police departments, and bars. Asians established ethnic-oriented communities, restaurants, cleaning stores, and supply houses. Blacks we created music, but we don't own it no more. Blacks were not permitted to establish culture-based businesses. Prior to emancipation, the North and South enacted laws and ordinances that prohibited blacks from owning businesses that competed with whites. Even after emancipation, that remained the case. Blacks were prohibited by the legal and social sanctions that withheld capital, market opportunities, access to resources, and education from establishing businesses. Even in raising tobacco, cotton, and various livestock, where blacks had unquestionable skill, they were generally forbidden to raise and sell their products in competition with the whites. And so now we're getting to our lack of a sense of unity. Another reason that blacks cannot emulate ethnics in their lack of group unity or sense of community, right? Racial integration, black people's long-standing objective, is the antithesis of group togetherness. Integration fragments blacks into even smaller groups and scatters them among the majority white society. This scattering has destroyed the cohesion of black communities. Upper and middle class blacks live in small enclaves as powerless minorities among white majorities all across the nation. They're isolated without a bond to their racial roots and typically see themselves as this united, weakened people. Although it raises a great deal of emotional conflict, and successfully integrated blacks find comfort and security in being white in most respects except color. There are few emotional bridges back into the black community, so they identify with and support the power and material resources of white communities. Government in dominant white society have historically rewarded blacks who identify with the larger white community and placed their welfare above that of the black community. For selling out their own community, blacks were often rewarded with special positions, money, or meritorious manumission. There has been no similar legal or reward system to encourage members of Asian or Hispanic groups to turn against members of their own race. Contrarily, they have received rewards for maintaining a strong sense of community and ethnic identity. Cultural unity and community cohesiveness have been the key for their survival. They came with extended families intact. They came with freedom to send back for loved ones they had left behind. They engaged in trade, moving goods and currency back and forth. They were generally free to practice their cultures in this country, guard their traditions, school their children in their own languages, practice their respective religions, and in every other way live as free citizens. Not one of these freedoms was historically available to blacks, certainly not during slavery. All right, so our unity, our lack of unity is our own barrier to overcome. But he's also saying that there's reward in unity, there's respect in unity, there's future in unity, there's power in unity, right? And so as the one ethnic group who has no unity, that renders us at the bottom of the list of ethnic groups. So let's talk about skin color. What does skin color have to do with all of this, right? Because there is a hierarchy when it comes to skin color. Skin color is the single most important factor that prevents blacks from emulating ethnic immigrants because it defines their role, status, and limits their access to resources. The skin color and physical attributes of non-black ethnic immigrants is much closer to that of whites. White ethnics and Asians are more accessible to the dominant white society than are blacks. The long history of American race relations seems to point to one fact, that blacks' high visibility has made them a convenient target for many of the social conflicts and insecurities of each white ethnic group that has reached the shores. Ethnic immigrants learn early, and one of the last things they forget is to avoid contact with America's black pariah. Other groups can blend in or assimilate with the dominant culture. Blacks' skin color does not permit them to blend. So just our skin color alone, the mark of the beast, the curse of Ham, not the mark of the beast rather, but the curse of Ham. Blackness is seen as get backness. Don't mess with the blacks. So we have been labeled as the troubled group, as the problem group, as the group that you don't mess with. So we ain't got no friends out here in these streets. But we're not united. We're not united with ourselves, and we don't have any friends out here in these streets. Our blackness is a mark not only against other groups, but it's a mark against ourselves. We've learned to see blackness as a bad thing, and other groups don't even have to recognize blackness because they got each other and they have access to whiteness. So let's talk about blackness phobia, right? For centuries, the concept of blackness has held intense meaning for whites. The black color has the ability to distort, dismantle, or totally obliterate whiteness or the absence of color. The concept threatens whites' ingrained values of culture, race dominance, bloodline, and genetic popularity. Whites' society fear for blacks' power and potency necessitated legal definitions that tracked the flow of black blood. The fear of blackness made it important that society rigidly defined who and what was black. Once defined, neither black person nor their blood were permitted to assimilate into mainstream society or white veins. Even a small quantity, one drop of black blood could dominate white blood and determine a person's race. Across the nation, laws were enacted defining who was black. These laws established strict standards for whiteness, declaring that 1/4, 1/16, or even one drop of black blood made a person black, while conversely, no amount of white blood in the human body could dominate a single drop of black blood. No other ethnic population in the nation, including those with visibly non-white biological features, have ever been so rigidly defined, right? Because all other groups of melanated people could affect the whiteness of white people. The one drop rule was once used as a standard by the U.S. Census. James F. Davis, in this book, Who is Black? One Nation's Definition, lamented how blacks are held to a different blood lineage definition than members of any other racial or ethnic group. For example, Indians who are typically held to be worse off than blacks were never held to the same degrading standards as blacks. Persons of 1/4 or one less American Indian ancestry were not generally defined as Indians unless it was their choice. Either way, they were acceptable to the larger society and could assimilate. The same seems to have applied to the immigrants from the Far East and Pacific Islands. There's no statutory efforts in America to determine which persons were 1/8 Hungarian, Russian, Japanese, Mexican, Turkish, Canadian, or members of any other immigrant groups. The quantity of blood or the one drop of blood rule targeted blacks. As James F. Davis said, Americans do not insist that an American with a small fraction of Polish ancestry can be classified as a Pole, or that someone with a single remote Greek ancestor be designated as Greek, or that someone with any trace of Jewish lineage is Jewish and nothing else. So blackness has been targeted, blackness has been branded, blackness has been labeled, blackness has been denigrated. If you are black, then you are seen as a threat to whiteness. Now, all other melanated groups of people, whether you highly melanated or a little bit of melanated, but all other groups of melanin in them, if they mate with whites enough and they keep mating with the melanin, they could breed out whites. But that just shows you that because white men love Asian women. White men love Asian women because that skin tone won't change that much, right? It'll yellow up, but it won't change that much because you can whiten that, right? But this skin, this right here, this is a reminder that their physical features can be wiped out. Maybe Dr. Wilson, maybe Dr. Frances Cress Wilson may have a point about the fear of genetic annihilation. Maybe she may have a point, because if there's black phobia, if blackness has been targeted even down to a drop of blood, hey, if you have that, then you're part of this class of people, then you're not part of us. You can't be white because you have that one drop of white blood, but you can have a drop of anything else and be whatever you want to be. That's what Dr. Anderson is getting at. The psychological and economic baggage of passing, right? Dark-skinned blacks reacted to light or mixed blacks passing with feelings of abandonment and anger. Many felt offended that a mixed black would reject or choose to live as someone other than the black person. Whites took offense because the passing black had beaten their blood monitoring practices and was unlawfully enjoying the fruits of white society. On the other hand, dark-skinned blacks passed during slavery in reverse. Darker black slaves who ran away passed by pretending that they were freeborn or freed blacks. The darker skinned blacks dressed and acted as if they had natural rights to freedom. So that has always been a thing too. Of course, we already know, pit everything that you can that's black against each other. Dark against light, tall against short, fat against skinny, smart against dumb, all that stuff, right? But there comes a psychological effect too of the blacks who had to reject their blackness to pass and live as a white person. There's a psychological effect to that, to condition yourself to overlook and just dismiss your blackness because you have some white in you, or you look like you have some white in you. So now we're talking about immigration laws, right? Immigration laws create and maintain a racial, ethnic, religious, and color-based balanced in America. Color gradation has been an important ranking factor. The darker the skin color, the lower the immigration quota. Blacks had the darkest skin color with a racial quota of 0. A writer for the Virginia Gazette, as far back as the 1700s, alluded to the foolishness of such an order of acceptability. He said, if Negroes are to be slaves on account of his color, the next step will be to enslave every mulatto in the kingdom, then all the Portuguese, next the French, then the brown-complected Englishmen, and so on until there are only freemen left. There's only one freeman left, which will be the man of the palest complexion in the three kingdoms. During the century that followed, quotas kept free blacks out of the country. With the exception of the English, the codes restricted new immigrants from any one country to 2% of the number of the individual's nationality reside in the continental United States, as determined by the census of 1980. Immigration laws passed in the 1880s and 1890s were based on the census figures of 1790. Blacks were slaves and not considered citizens. Thus, with the complexion of a few blacks from the Caribbean islands, blacks were excluded. Almost 30 years later, in 1920, the United States Immigration and Naturalization Services upheld the 0 immigration quota for blacks, and they were officially shut out of the United States until the late 1960s. The quota remained 0 until 1965, when Black African nations began to receive their independence from colonial rule and had to be officially recognized. One can only suppose that these nations ascended in power and wealth. The American immigration quotas for their citizens will rise accordingly. So as the nations are favored more by white nations, as Black nations are favored more by white nations, they can immigrate. They can immigrate to the white nations. So a quick thing about Black patriotism, right? Ironically, no other racial or ethnic group in America has demonstrated the long-term patriotism of Blacks. Blacks are the only non-white group of people to have fought in defense of America in every military conflict since the country's beginning. Blacks have fought in armed conflicts against the mother countries of most of the ethnic immigrants now in America. So Black people have fought against even the countries of the immigrants who come and enjoy the fruits of America. For nearly 4 centuries, Blacks were the first to die in support of the principles of the nation. Yet they were excluded while foreign immigrants arrived daily at the doors of this great nation and are welcomed. So he's getting at it is our skin color and our skin color and our history in America that keeps us where we are. So let's also talk about some hard work, right? Talk about hard work real quick. It is common to hear Japanese, Chinese, and Germans being cited as model hard workers. Before Blacks became obsolete as common labor in the 1960s, they were the model for doing the hardest, dirtiest, most dangerous, and backbreaking work. Ironically, conservatives and governments are suggesting that emulating these recent immigrants and their hard work is the cure for Blacks' protracted poverty and high unemployment, when no other group in this country have ever come close to working as hard as Black people have worked in this country. Recommending more hard work for a race of ex-slaves is similar to curing an alcoholic by suggesting that the drunk do more drinking. Having never been compensated for centuries of past labor is the bigger part of the problem, not whether Black people are willing to work hard, right? So that's the ethics of hard work. Let's get to the myth, right? The moral value of work was promoted under the aegis of Puritan ethics, and the most early colonial settlers preached about but did not practice. The intense labor demands of the New World required most settlers to work. But contrary to the moral myth, they tried to avoid work by forcing others to do it for them, while they took the credit and the profits. White society was especially adept at avoiding certain kinds of work when Blacks were present. Since hard labor in and of itself did not convey nor confer dignity, they did not want Blacks to see them doing lowly work. Arduous work carried a low status and was routinely avoided by whites who preferred being seen in a management capacity. The white Southerners' disdain for hard work was commonly accepted in and around immigration ports. Stanley Liebergott, in his book, The Americans, an Economic Record, supported the common impression that if anyone was lazy, it was more likely the enslaver rather than the enslaved. Modern day conservatives continue to believe that the answer to Black Americans' problem is more diligence and hard work. In his book, The Economics and Politics of Race, conservative Black economist Thomas Sowell is eloquent in his admiration of immigrants' willingness to work long and hard and get ahead. However, he condemns Blacks on the assumption that Blacks develop poor work habits as a resistance to work and had developed under slavery. Thomas Sowell believes that lazy slave myth, though the term lazy slave is an oxymoron. A lazy slave would have had a very difficult time surviving under the inhumane conditions of American slavery. Sowell apparently feels that Black people had the obligation to produce for the overseers, while Blacks should have felt such an obligation. Obligation is unclear. So basically, Thomas Sowell got life fucked up. I'm gonna just say it like that. Black people have never had the luxury of being lazy in America. At what point in American history have Black people, the majority of Black people, had the luxury of even wanting or enjoying laziness, not doing anything? If we don't do anything, we don't have anything. We've never been in the position to be lazy in America. I don't give a damn what nobody is saying. We've never had the opportunity to be lazy. Other ethnic groups have, but we haven't. And other ethnic groups have had government help and government assistance. And the government have never been against these groups en masse. They might have been against individuals in these groups, but not these groups en masse. And now Dr. Anderson, there's a table in this book, table 6. And it's the U.S. government's peripheral ordering of immigrants according to the official quota set in 1924. So the preferred immigrants. So the first is the English, skin color white, religion Protestant. Immigration quota is open. We're taking them all. Irish, North Europe, white, Protestant, immigration quota 34,007. Western Europe, white, Protestant, immigration quota 28,567. Eastern Europe, white, Protestant, immigration quota 51,227. Southern Europe, white, Catholic, immigration quota 3,825. Middle East, white, Jewish, Muslim, immigration quota 124. Far East, yellow, Buddhist, the religion is Buddhist or other, immigration quota is 100. Hispanic, skin color brown, religion Catholic or other, immigration quota is restricted. African, skin color black, religion is combinations, immigration quota is closed, right? Black immigrants are not as welcome in this country as other immigrants. But even if they do come into this country, they are not, some of them are going to side with the whites. If blacks are at the bottom, who is at the middle and the top in the racial and ethnic ranking system in this country? The major elements in determining one's ranking are race, skin color, country of origin, ethnicity, and religious denomination. The higher your ranking, the more you are welcome and preferred to live as a citizen in this nation. America was established as an English-speaking Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation. Wealth and power were concentrated at the top of the scale in the hands of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants or the WASP, and decreased in accord with the darkness of a person's skin color. The racial and ethnic ordering, as shown in Table 6, is a comparative analysis of the allocation of benefits, access to resources, immigration, policies, and foreign affairs relationships. There has always been an open immigration policy with certain allied WASP nations. It was not possible for the United States to remain an English-only nation. However, government policies kept the American population and power close to the original founders and culture in other respects. The highest positions of wealth and power are held by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. These groups have well entrenched social positions characterized by a predominance in economic and political power and buttressed with a strong cohesive group solidarity. Since the founding of the nation, power and wealth have remained concentrated in the hands of the WASP. So Blacks and ethnic immigrants compete for resources, right? Because that's going to happen. We're going to compete for resources. A continuing flow of immigrants, decade after decade, from 1607 to the present day, came believing that America abound with freedom and wealth. Common sense dictates that had they anticipated, they would face the kind of life most Black people face. Immigration would have ceased immediately after the first boatload arrived. The flow of immigrants never ceased because they were never treated like the Blacks. They were treated like human beings while we were chattel. As a matter of fact, ethnic and racial immigrants historically have been a wedge between whites and Blacks, giving whites an alternative to interact with Blacks. Each time in history, either before or after a war, when the American economy was expanding and could have offered material economic benefits to Blacks, a new influx of immigrants or refugees arrives to fill the void and further exile Blacks from the fruitful participation in the national life, according to historian Dan Lacey. A major myth is that there has been competition between Blacks and ethnic groups. There has been no such competition. European ethnics simply bumped Blacks from whatever they were interested in getting because they were higher in the order of social preference. After they finished competing for jobs, housing, or union control, Blacks then applied for anything that was available. If racial customs did not exclude Blacks, they optimistically waited until jobs or housing were passed down through the ethnic hierarchy, extending from English down to Jew. As competition for resources increase and Blacks become more frustrated, conflicts for power, resources, or even basic rights are developing between Blacks and all ethnic and racial groups, who rank higher than Blacks in the order of preference. If Blacks' marginal level of subsistence does not improve, they will become the common denominator in every single clash. Since the 1980s, Blacks have clashed with Arabs in Cleveland and Detroit. In the early 1990s, New York and Boston were outraged over the slaying of Blacks by Jews and ethnic whites. Violent confrontations between Blacks and Koreans, Vietnamese, Laotians, and Cambodians merchants have arisen across the countries and cities like Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. The continuous conflicts in Miami between Blacks and Cubans have ignited 4 major riots since 1973. In some instances, Blacks were angered by a single offensive act. At other times, the riot was a response to what Blacks perceived as a pattern of offensive acts. Centuries of unjust racial subordination to immigrants has generated a smoldering tension between Blacks and those who came to the community from foreign nations higher in the preference order than Blacks. Today, there's little cooperation, political or otherwise, between Blacks and minority groups. For the most part, ethnic minorities do not support Black causes. They have been getting a free ride at Black people's expense on civil rights and minority programs. As members of loosely formed political coalitions, they are mostly quiet while Blacks agape, but they are quick to stake their claim on affirmative action benefits won by Blacks. From Los Angeles, California to Miami, Florida, conflicts arise between Blacks and ethnic groups as they seek to share the power and wealth in the mainstream beyond the shadow of Blacks. In the 1990 mayoral election in Chicago, Hispanic leaders leapfrogged between Black and white factions, offering support whenever they seem to be the most to gain from the Hispanic communities. David Dinkins, the first black mayor of New York City, lost his re-election bid in 1993 along the lines of racial issues. All the ethnic blocs, except Puerto Ricans, voted against Dinkins. So now talking about a bit about conflicts between Hispanics and blacks, right? In the 1990 census data, 85% of those listed as Hispanic also classified themselves as Caucasians. 85% of those listed as Hispanic classified themselves as white, right? The ethnic group is the fastest growing population that is challenging blacks for numerical and political dominance as a minority, which it is not. Hispanics have enjoyed the benefits of having it both ways. First, they criticize white society for its disproportionate share of wealth and power. Then they classify themselves as Caucasians. These groups classify themselves as Caucasians for social purposes, then as minorities to qualify for government programs. The question then is no longer who is white. It is who is permitted to be classified as white. Hacker, in his analysis of 1990 census data, indicated that most Asians, Middle Easterners, and Hispanics by culture and color are allowed to enter and move up the class system. They are permitted the option of calling themselves white for benefit purposes. Thus, a common front is being formed, with blacks the only excluded group, right? Hispanics reap great advantages and receive benefits under minority programs by calling themselves minorities, although first-generation Hispanics do not experience some cultural discrimination. They have not suffered historical statutory injuries by the government within the continental U.S. Their high ethnic acceptability among whites deflects benefits and resources that should be directed toward blacks. Besides having gotten themselves included under the minority label, what is the justification for the U.S. supporting a never-ending influx of Hispanics from Mexico, Central America, Latin America, and the Caribbean islands? How can Hispanics, whose ancestors have previously benefited from black enslavement, equate themselves to blacks who are still suffering through the worst human holocaust in the history of mankind? More specifically, why would the government continue to perpetuate a wrong by comparing a fluid, ever-changing Hispanic and Asian immigrant population with a static black population? Hispanic and Asian populations qualify to receive services to help minorities to assimilate and advance into mainstream society. The static black population remains intact until the next generation of immigrants arrive, needing minority assistance. We have no friends. All other groups who are acting like they down with us are on the back end competing to get everything, all the resources, and get more resources than us and leave us just out in the cold. So the conclusion: blacks are not immigrants and cannot emulate them. Their circumstances spring from different experiences and options. Blacks have been a part of this country from its inception. They have never received recognition or benefits commensurate with their labor and wealth contributions to the development of this now rich and powerful nation. The difference in the treatment according to Asian, Hispanic, and European ethnics make it quite clear that contributions of hard, uncompensated labor, patriotism, and cultural gifts have little to do with who is permitted to assimilate and enjoy the fruits of American society. Dominant society remains insensitive and ignorant of the great insult to injury it has committed by allowing a string of immigrants across the centuries to receive first-class citizenship status that has been deemed Black Americans who have served as builders, laborers, and military veterans. Blacks are insulted when members of ethnic and racial groups come to America from countries that were formerly U.S. enemies. Indians, Asians, Hispanics, and nearly every conceivable European ethnic group has engaged in some form of declared war against Americans. Blacks are the only racial or ethnic group that has fought in every major conflict on the side of white America. The insults are further compounded when white society provides new immigrants, refugees, aid, and family assistance while begrudging while begrudging it to blacks. More insults are added on as whites then label the newcomers minorities accord to their equal claims to the country's affirmative action programs, sell them homes in neighborhoods where blacks remain excluded, make business loans to them that are deemed to blacks, and praise them for their strong sense of cultural unity, the same unity that white society fears and seeks to destroy when exhibited by blacks. We will never be seen in the same light as other groups of people in this country. And other groups of people have no interest or incentive to be true allies to us. Hell, we can't even see the incentive of being true allies to ourselves. Other groups will not, so they will continue to compete and outpace us and outgain us, and then come into our communities and benefit off of our consumption. Black people, we have to wake up. We have to do something different besides being the labor for all other groups or being the underclass for all other groups. Nobody's going to give us a hand up or a handout. So that was chapter 5, page 86 to 106. From page 86 to 106. So that was chapter 5. Chapter 6 is page 107 to, let me see it. Page 107 to, I don't know. Have I lost the page? Have I found the page? 107, I can't be that much. Hold on. I'm going to go to the front of the book. From 107, chapter 6 is 107 to, I'm tripping. From 107 to 155. So chapter 6 is 107 to 155. That's a long chapter. Yep. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is 107 to 165. 107 to 165. That's chapter 6. But for this, it's 86 to 106. So make sure you get your copy. If you haven't gotten your copy, link is in the description for you to get your copy. Remember to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe. Let's get these comments up. Let's get these likes up. Remember, if you don't hit that like button, then you ain't African American. You don't like black people. You don't like Dr. Claude Anderson. You like white people. Remember, hit that like button. Let's get this information out. Let's make sure our people know what time it is. Shout out to Dennis Sperling. I'll put a link in the description to his podcast. If you haven't subscribed to it or checked it out, go check out Dennis Sperling. Make sure you check out Dr. Claude Anderson's YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that in the description as well, so you can support Dr. Claude Anderson and everything that he has. Get all of his books and get all of my books. And as you can see, the Cash App and the website scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you support Patrick, support PC, support everybody that's got going on. Thank you to me, Kim. Thank you for your Cash App. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who continue to support on the Shoulders of Giants. And yes, one more thank you. Let me make sure I get all my thank yous in there. For my Patreon, because the pledge has been updated. So I'm going to say, where is that? I can't find that. But thank you to everybody, all my patrons. It's not coming up. I can't see it. But thank you to all my patrons, everybody who supports me on Patreon, everybody who supports me via Cash App, everybody who supports me via PayPal. Thank you for all your contributions. Your contributions to go to help to the resources for the Black History School. Hey, I love you all, and I'll catch y'all on the other side.